Ladies and gentlemen, our event is about to begin. Lenny Liebman, go ahead.
Thanks so much, and welcome everybody to today's webinar on why your financial service firm can't afford to ignore enterprise mobility and security. Brought to you by our sponsor IBM and obviously from your friends at eWeek. I'm Lenny Liebman again, and I'm going to be your moderator today. Just want to go over a couple of things before we get started. First of all, the slides will advance for you automatically through this event. And also, this is interactive. So you see a Q&A widget there. Please turn off your pop-up blockers and make use of that. We've got two great speakers and subject matter experts with us today, and this is your opportunity to maybe get a little free consulting. If they say something, you want them to elaborate on it, if you want to challenge their assertion, anything at all, feel free to submit your questions at any time. Don't wait until our Q&A session after their presentations, because we want to get your question into the queue early. You'll also see a resource widget there. You can download today's slides. Everybody always asks about that. That's available in the resource box. Also, there's a link to a free trial there so that you might find very useful, especially after you hear us discuss the topic today, where we won't only be talking about why you can't ignore enterprise mobility and security, but also some things that you can do about it. There's also going to be a survey that's going to pop up at the end. Please respond to that. We love your feedback. It helps us continuously improve the quality of these presentations that we bring to you. So with that out of the way, and if you have any technical problems, go ahead and use that Q&A widget too, so we can give you some personalized support. So we have, again, two great speakers. First up is going to be Howard Cohen, who, if you read eWeek, if you actually read pretty much any industry publication and or if you attend these webinars, you're familiar with. Yes, especially if you've been doing this for a long time, because Howard's been around for a while. But what we love about Howard is not only does he present and write for just about everybody, but he is not just a theoretician. He's got decades of hands-on experience with channel organizations, so he understands not only the technology, but also how organizations like ours kind of assimilate and actually utilize that technology to achieve whatever our particular objectives are, whether they're financial or marketing or operational, et cetera. So Howard's going to be up first, and then he's going to be followed by Justin Van Geroff, who's an IBM security specialist. Justin's also got a lot of hands-on experience guiding especially financial services firms in meeting and even exceeding the regulatory requirement, and he started off in the credit union business, so he was exposed at a young age to NCUA and FFIC regulations, and over the last, 4 years or so, he's been involved with the IBM Mass 360 team, again, particularly specializing in the needs of financial organizations as they craft mobility strategy that can support their various security and compliance requirements. So you got two great speakers. You have the opportunity to ask them questions. Please take advantage of your ability to do so. And I think without further ado, Howard, I'm going to invite you to get started.
Thank you, Lenny, for making me feel older than hello, everybody, and welcome to today's seminar. Today my job today is to offer some insight into EMS. And no, EMS is not yet another dopey acronym, which, by the way, is what YADA really stands for, yada, yada, yada. And having nothing to do with EMS, the emergency medical services, just to dispel those myths. Today, we're going to deal with a little bit of alphabet soup, if you will. There are a lot of acronyms, many of which contributed to the growth of what we today see as enterprise mobility and security. So I'm going to just kind of take us through some of that so we can get past the alphabet soup and into the meat of the matter, why enterprise mobility and security in particular are so important. It's been a long road and a lot of great technology along the way. We're going to take a look at it. And so in this session, we'll take a look at how EMS developed over time, all the component parts of it that grew around it. We're also going to look at the emergence of unified endpoint management, which contributes very, very powerfully to the overall picture. And then finally, Justin is going to expand upon the importance of EMS specifically to the financial services industry. So you'll get to see both why EMS is important and why it's important to financial services as well. In the beginning, there was the mobile device, and the mobile device was good. Mobile device is something that has been highly consumerized. People love their mobile devices. People live on their mobile devices. They do everything on their mobile devices. And by the way, their mobile devices keep close tabs on them as well. The consumerization of the mobile device is important because it gave rise to the desire on the part of many people to use that same mobile device not only to manage their personal lives, but also to manage their working life. And so it contributed very heavily to the emergence of the bring your own device phenomenon, which is now maturing and very widely accepted. Many corporations have seen the great value of giving people that flexibility. People work longer hours. They work on their commute. They work at home. Corporations love that. But, of course, it's a double-edged sword, and we'll take a look at both of those edges. So let's start off by looking at that, and here's the challenge. The challenge is basically in the balance. What balance? Well, the balance between what users want. When somebody takes out their mobile device, what do they want? They want it to be easy to use. They don't want to be burdened by a lot of extra clicks and hand gestures. They want to be able to get right to what they want. They want to be able to bring their own device. They want to be able to use this for work and play, and they don't see any reason why they shouldn't. On the work side, they want ready access to all of their resources, just like they have to all their personal resources. They want to be able to get at data easily. They would like to have a consistent user experience, a robust user experience, an excellent user experience, because this is their mobile device. They get to play their music on it, they get to read on it, take pictures with it. Well, they want to be able to access documents with it, make changes, communicate concerns. They want to work as easily as they play. They want social networking capability. They want to connect with all of their friends, both their personal friends and their business friends. And for a lot of people, that line is blurring. They like to be friendly with everybody. That's not a bad thing. That's a very good thing. So ultimately what they want is robust communication. They want everything to be easy at their fingertips and workable. And that sounds great. However, on the other side of the balance is what their company needs. First and foremost, they need to know that whoever's accessing their corporate network is who they say they are. So they have a need for strong authentication. They need to know that the person who's connecting to their network and the device that they're using to connect to it have the right to access their network. They want to make sure their data is safe, that it doesn't leak from that mobile device out there to other places. They want secure management of that ready data access. They want to make sure that if they're accessing the information, but the information cannot leave through unapproved means like personal email, personal messaging, or so forth. This requires powerful encryption. They want to make sure that the data, even if it is accessed by somebody who shouldn't have it, they don't have the keys, and therefore all they have is gibberish. If a device is ever lost or stolen, they want to make sure that they can remotely wipe that device. And due to legal concerns, they want to make sure that they can selectively wipe that device, meaning they wipe out their corporate data, but they don't wipe out anything that belongs to the owner of that device, the user who is their employee. This requires total separation of the personal data from the corporate data so that they can keep the corporate data secure and leave the personal data completely alone. So the challenge is in balance, and a lot of what MDM gave us, mobile device management, was the capability to manage a lot of this. Mobile device management focused on the device, making sure the device was secure, making sure the device was capable of communicating with the network safely, making sure that the device could be disabled or erased when it was lost or stolen. A lot of what we're talking about here in the balance was addressed originally by mobile device management. Now, there were a lot of people at that time who almost didn't care about the device. They saw the device as something that could be easily handled and just kind of abstracted. They were much more concerned with the data. So they felt that MDM should stand for mobile data management. And this made a lot of sense because the data is the issue. You know, you have your mobile device, and as we mentioned earlier, you have your own personal data sitting on that device, and if it's configured properly, you may have corporate data resident on the device as well. The device is out there in the field. It's perceived as being vulnerable. And so you want to put a firewall between your personal data, your corporate data, and also your personal applications and your corporate applications, so that nobody can take an email they received on their corporate email and forward it out to others using their personal email where it's completely out of control. Because at the end of the day, if you're able to do that, you're able to completely defeat any and all security measures that have been put in place. So it was very important from the dawn of MDM to figure out how do we separate the personal data, the corporate data, and never let the two interact on the device. A big part of this, the first part of it, of course, is identity and access management. IAM, identity and access management, includes a number of different requirements. First and foremost, authenticate the user. Is the person who's trying to access the network using this mobile device who they say they are? Authorize resource access. If they are who they say they are, give them access only to specific resources that they should have access to. Approve the device. Make sure that the device is what it says it is and that it is secure enough to not create any exploit capabilities for those who might want to hack into the network. Assure the safety and the privacy of the data. Usually involving heavy encryption. Is the device capable of handling that encryption? Great. If so, let's conduct encrypted conversations with each other. More recently, identity and access management helps to analyze user behavior. If a user from New York suddenly signs in from Russia, how'd they get there? Have they been there before? Is this something we should expect? Especially if they signed in from New York in the morning and signed in from Russia at lunchtime. Something's not quite right there. So identity and access management technology is there to make sure that the user and their device are who they say they are and will not represent any threat to the network. There are many good reasons for this. Password, ID and password is not enough. Wish it was. But the reality is that users overcome password security in many different ways, and they do so very, very often. The fact is that most users use simple things like the word password. There was one stat that said that 80% of users are using the word password. That was a couple of years ago. But now they're using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're using their wife's name, their husband's name, their dog or cat's name, their QWERTY, just the first 6 keys on the upper left-hand side of the keyboard. Let's just use that. Some people use login or let me in or something like that. It's not hard for a bad actor to quickly guess a password in most cases because a lot of people use easy ones. Many users make it even easier for internal thieves to get at their data by using a sticky note to remember, quote unquote, remember their ID and password. They stick that sticky note under a keyboard, sometimes on top of the keyboard, as you see here, sometimes on the side of their monitor. They make it very, very easy. Also, studies have shown that almost half of users never change their password. They haven't changed them in at least 5 years. Sometimes 10 or more. Some people just don't feel they can remember anything but the one password that they're used to, especially if it's a complex password. So in that same survey, more than half of the users have 5 or fewer passwords that they use across their entire online life. So if you figure their password out for one resource, you can access most all of their resources. All of this is dangerous, and all of this is far less controllable because it's the user. And you cannot control a user like you can a digital system. One of the tools that we've put to use in authentication is multi-factor authentication. No, not a Master of Fine Arts, another yada, but a multi-factor authentication. In some cases, this involves a token. A token generates a random number every 60 seconds, usually a 6 or 8 digit number. The network knows what that number is going to be, and so the user appends that 6-digit number to the end of their password, making it unique for that 60 seconds. And if they take more than 60 seconds, they have to generate a new number and try again. This combines something you know, your password, with something you have, something you possess, and therefore provides significantly stronger authentication, although some people felt that that was not enough, so they started using alternative device codes. An alternative device code is something you request when you try to log in. For example, if you try to log in and it has or asks for your mobile phone number. Well, that combines something you have, your mobile phone, with something you know, your password. And so your mobile phone becomes the thing you possess rather than a token. There have been many biometric approaches to multi-factor authentication. Add your password to a fingerprint. Add your password to facial recognition, although some systems do use fingerprints and facial recognition in place of passwords, which is certainly secure, more secure than a password. Somebody can't borrow your face, but certainly not multi-factor. There are keyboard software, I should say, that interpret your cadence and the speed at which you type and various other factors about the way in which you actually type your password and determine whether or not you're you. So these are multiple ways in which devices can protect you using multi-factor authentication. Some systems also add network access control, where they look at the media access or MAC layer address of the device. Every device has a unique MAC layer address, as well as hopefully a somewhat unique IP address. They'll look at that MAC address in addition to your password and other factors to make sure that you're secure. The message here is that no matter how critical, no matter how sensitive your data is, there are measures upon measures that you can pile on top of each other to increase the security of your authentication policy. Other technologies that have been integrated and contributed to EMS include mobile information management, which only allows approved applications to actually use or transmit corporate data. It's not just you, not just your device, but it's the applications themselves. If somebody tries to run a porting routine of any kind, file transfer routine, FTP protocol, MIM is what protects your system from allowing that to happen. Similar to MIM is MAM, Mobile Application Management, which controls user access to specific applications. You may have access to your company's ERP, but you'll only have access to certain modules, and very often this is role-based. If you're in the finance department, you'll have access to certain financial information. If you're in the sales department, you'll have information to you'll have access to customer information. And so depending on who you are, the system determines what you'll have access to. And this increases the security in your EMS play. It's also important to remember that there are other ways of attacking you that enterprise mobility and security must address. 3 of the popular ones are Trojans, viruses, worms. We've all contended with those over the years, put measures in place to do that. These days, EMS incorporates a lot of these capabilities. We should also not forget to talk about spam. spam is becoming more and more of a threat as we see the incredible growth of phishing and spear phishing. In the recent conversations we've heard about the Russian hack on the ENC, spear phishing was a very big part of that. Here's where people get sent an email that seems to be genuine, it seems to be coming from who it says it's coming from, and it contains a link to some resource that they want you to take a look at, and you very innocently click on that link and open the door to all kinds of horrible activity. Phishing has become one of the foremost threats that people who want to get at your data are using, mainly because, again, it attacks the user. It's called social engineering. The user is not a digital system. They do not blindly obey rules that are issued to them. They do what they think is the right thing to do. Sometimes they're wrong. So phishing is a big concern, and all of this falls under the general grouping of antivirus gateway, making sure that nasty, inappropriate software and content does not infiltrate your network. So as you see in the lower left-hand corner, we're building quite a stack into enterprise mobility and security. And here we are. As we add all of those together, enterprise mobility and security comprises management of the device itself, as in MDM, identity and access management, as in IAM, MFA, data protection and application management, coming from MIM and MAM, and security and analytics, coming from AVG. We've brought all of this together into one grouping, one discipline that we see as being very tangential, very adjacent, very much more efficient when it's grouped together. In fact, this has given rise to yet another dopey acronym, not so dopey, UEM, Unified Endpoint Management. Yes, that is one ring to rule them all. This is one console to rule them all, comprising everything that we've looked at, the device itself, the data that's on the device, the security of that data, the acceptance of specific applications, allocation of resources based on role. All of these things and more are comprised into EMS. And EMS is most effective, most efficient when it's unified, when you don't have dozens of different tools to manage dozens of different platforms. This becomes most important because all of you live in heterogeneous environments. You've got mobile devices from a variety of sources. You've got desktop computers. You have applications from a variety of publishers. And you don't want to have a different protection console or software for your mobile device, for your smartphone, for your tablet, another one for your Windows, another one for your Macintosh platform, another one for your Linux platform. You'd like to have more unification, as much unification as you can, so that you can address all of these, especially in the world of BYOD, where new platforms may be thrown at you at any time. You want to be able to respond to them and manage them with something other than your company policy, which says, nope, sorry, that device is not acceptable. You want to be able to say no as seldom as you possibly can. So UEM brings all your device types, all your application types, all your data types together and manages them and secures them in a consistent, uniform fashion that reduces your training, reduces your support requirements, and gives you much more power in terms of the control that you can exercise. Okay, so we've established a context for the construction and the development of enterprise mobility and security. And I see that a couple of questions have been added during this. That's great. We'll definitely get to them at the end of the session. What I'd like to do now is introduce the next segment and talk just briefly about why enterprise mobility and security and unified endpoint management are so important specifically to the financial services industry. And all I'm going to do here is raise your awareness by presenting some statistics. So some simple, straightforward statistics. Security Scorecard, in their 2016 Financial Industries Cybersecurity Report, tells us that 18 out of the 20 banks they looked at support one or more weak or insecure cyber suites. They also tell us that 15 out of 20, 75% of them, had at least one expired secure sockets layer certificate. Not uncommon. That runs across all industries, but it's just as true here in financial services as it is anywhere else, maybe even more so. 9 out of 20 were found to have open file transfer ports. If you're not getting frightened, I'd be worried. 25% have open SMB ports found. Even if you don't know what these acronyms stand for, clearly they're leaving a lot of doors open. Here's a few more. For those of you who are familiar with a lot of the exploits that have been in the marketplace, 3/4 of the commercial banks they looked at had generic malware. It was found during the survey. Ponyloader in almost all of them. VertexNet in almost half of them. Keybase in 8 out of 20. Malware events of some kind were detected in literally all of them within the past year. And over 422 different malware events were identified in at least one of these commercial banks. A total of 788 malware events detected in all, over the past 365 days. That's a lot of events. Events aren't necessarily exploits. They didn't necessarily get through, but they certainly tried to. The most common attacks, unauthorized access attacks, malicious code attacks where they introduce something in a Trojan or a virus that gets them in. 17% are out there for as much as a year trying to find a good, solid way to get in, and they ultimately do. 6% were categorized as suspicious activity with nothing further than that. And only 3% were due to access where somebody inside used their password to get at things that they should not. Now, when we're talking about insiders, 60% of the attacks that were identified came from inside the network. 44.5 clearly being malicious, somebody was trying to get at it. 15.5% being just stupid mistakes. But then again, when you're getting close to 2/3 of exploits coming from inside the company, it does kind of make you think again about where you're putting your emphasis. More of the threats are coming from inside. And it's very likely that if you're honest with yourself, it's likely that more than 90% of your security measures are put in place designed to protect from outside. So you may want to take a look at that again. And just focusing on the financial services industry itself, across all industries that were surveyed in the recent IBM 2016 Cybersecurity Intelligence Index, across all industries, 52,885,311 security events were identified in 2015. If you look only at the financial services industry, the average was 82,898,784. It's more than a third more than the average across all industries. So clearly, financial services is one of the prime targets that those out there who want to exploit your network are looking at. In today's ESAM, we're going to suggest that you seek solutions, and most specifically, we're going to take a look at IBM MAS 360. And with that, we have an expert from IBM, a friend of ours, Justin McDruff, who's going to take you through IBM's answer to all of this vulnerability. Justin, it's all yours.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks for the intro. So wanted to go through, obviously, there was a lot of good information in there. You're going to see some additional alphabet soup as we go through and we continue to explore, why you can't afford to ignore enterprise mobility and security anymore. And what it boils down to is really kind of two parts to the story, right? It's not supply and demand, it's actually demand and security. The biggest thing that we see is just the explosion of mobility, right? If you think back to what your financial institution was doing 7 years or 10 years ago before the invent of the iPhone versus 3 years ago before Surface, it's changed probably pretty dramatically, right? And it's going to change, right, from what you're currently doing to what you're doing 3 years from now. So the important part is picking a solution that can grow with your current, meet your current needs as well as grow to your future strategy. And really a lot of that stuff, what it comes down to is increasing productivity and providing employees the ability to connect all of their new gadgets and do that in a cost-effective manner, right? That's the biggest thing for that kind of perplexes CIOs and IT security personnel is how do I do this effectively and how do I make sure that I don't have to redo this in 3 years from now? And then on the other end, obviously if you're collecting and connecting all of those devices, you now have a security issue, right? So access to data increases burden, as we say. So really, now you have a need for data leak prevention, right? There's other aspects at play, but the biggest one is really going to be the regulatory requirements that you face. So I promised there would be more alphabet soup here. This probably looks familiar to most of you on the line, but FFIEC, FDIC, NCUA, FINRA, SEC, etc. They all have regulatory requirements that you need to follow, and one that's not on here for if we do have any insurance firms on here would be HIPAA if you have patient data that you're dealing with. But really, what it comes down to, it doesn't matter who your primary regulator is. What it comes down to is what do they need you to do, right? And these are they're all basically the same. This is actually taken from the FFIEC examination handbook. But really, it comes down to three things that kind of get you covered, right? And we've talked about that. Device management being the biggest one, being able to control the device, enforce passwords, enforce policy on that device. Containerization, which is the idea of providing separation of all of the corporate data on a device from all of the personal data. And then threat management, right, which we talked about, and I'll certainly share a little bit more on that subject here in the future. But the ability to really detect, protect, and respond to different types of malware out there. And then lastly, obviously, patch management kind of goes actually hand in hand with device management, making sure that devices have updated OSs, there's no vulnerabilities there as well. As far as all of these, I guess, shifts in strategies and challenges and regulations, really the role of IT has kind of changed, right? There's many different use cases within a single organization for a device, right? So we always talk about intended use of a device because it's not always a one-to-one, right? Yes, everybody gets email, but there may be special use cases there. There's even, between a corporate-owned device and a BYOD device, right? BYOD itself presents a lot of issues just because of now you have users that are picking their device and they're bringing in different types of hardware, different OS. Maybe it's Android. Saw actually a question come in as I was reviewing as Howard was doing his presentation on fragmentation of Android. That's a huge problem, right? That's a huge problem that you need to solve. One of the things that Mass 360 certainly can help you with, ensure that you don't have the Android version of security Swiss cheese entering your network. Right? There's a lot of different kind of use cases out there. I advanced too far for these mobile devices. I mentioned the first one, right? Everybody's doing email, calendar contacts. Everybody's getting on that, and all of that certainly needs to be containerized. But there's certainly some unique use cases that we have, right? We see a lot of customers. Doesn't matter who you are, bank, credit union, insurance. You walk into your place of business, you hand the customer, the client, an iPad that has a specific application, right? Hey, I'm here for a loan. My name's Justin, and you start filling out that loan documentation. That is a specific use case. The intended use of that device is different than what it would be for an employee's personal phone or a frontline's employee's iPad that they're doing, maybe giving presentations on, versus board of directors meetings. Very, very popular use case for our type of solution. Insurance providers, obviously I already mentioned this, protecting patient data, complying with HIPAA laws, and then obviously the need to be more productive, right, reducing paper. So as part of a solution set, you want to look for something that can cover you on all of those features and functionality that you need. So secure mail, that's basically, like I said, encrypted sandbox to separate all of the corporate data from all of the personal data. And let's be honest, right? A lot of people give out corporate devices, but if you really think about the intended use of that device, most organizations aren't doing what they need to do to lock down that device, right? So the intended use is really that of a BYOD device. Most places aren't blacklisting apps and doing the things that they need to do. So really that data needs to be containerized because you're not preventing somebody using a corporate device from putting their personal email on there, right, putting their personal applications, right? So it really becomes more like a BYOD device. And when it comes to that, what makes those devices, I guess, so great for consumers makes them terrible for corporate security, and that's convenience, right? In the eyes of Apple, Google, et cetera, end user is king. They can take the data, they can manipulate it any way that you want, right? The idea of UEM or a device management system is really to give the control back to the IT security professionals to control that down to the data level. So we can certainly go into that, but that's obviously the biggest probably use case that you see today and that you have today. But there's certainly stuff that you might be doing in the future. I talked about the self-serve branch kiosk, what we call kiosk mode, right? There's application lock, so you can lock that device down. It only runs that one application to collect the loan or to do the insurance claim or whatever that use case might be. The other piece of that is providing an enterprise app catalog, right? Because a lot of these might not be published. So pushing out applications that you have and the need to secure those applications as well. Another one that's not on here, very popular, is providing access to internal resources, whether it's Windows File Share, SharePoint, et cetera, an intranet site. And figuring out the best way to do that using the mobile enterprise gateway that we provide. As far as other use cases, a big one that we see, and we talked about this earlier, Howard mentioned it, is malware. Everybody's going through pen testing. You know that you're always looking for the weakest link. I'll tell you right now who the weakest link is. You guys have been doing firewall, IPS, AV, encryption, on your network for decades. That's not going to be your weakest link. The weakest link is the employee that's bringing that small computer in their pocket and walking it through your front doors every day. It may be connected to your email, so you have a connection there. Maybe they walk it through that connects to your Wi-Fi. Heck, they can take that device and they can stick it into their workstation to charge it up. And you're introducing, if it has malware on there, introducing that piece of malware one step closer to your enterprise data. So it's a huge problem. And obviously, with Master 360, there's an integrated malware agent into the Master 360 platform. So unified endpoint management, right? What does that mean? There's a lot of things that you need to do, and it doesn't really matter what type of device or use case it is. All it needs to be protected in one easy-to-use console. Right, and that's a concept that is lost on, I guess, on IT over the years as things have gotten bigger and more complex. People have been piecemealing things together and it starts to look like Frankenstein. It's not easy to use. So there's this concept of unified endpoint management, one one console to rule them all, and that's really as far as Mass 360. We've been doing this for years. It's a huge piece of our platform in how we can help financial institutions. I'll leave here on a kind of a success story for a large retail bank in North America. Really, their biggest challenge and what they were looking to do is they wanted to replace their outdated and expensive on-prem solution with something that was more cost-effective, while obviously with the need to meet regulatory requirements and comply with those regulations. So using Mass 360, they use really the three main things on here. Actually, they actually are using the threat management piece as well, but the main call-outs obviously is a container, right? Preventing data leaks in your email, providing remote access to internal resources, right? That internet site, Windows File Share, SharePoint, etc. And then kiosk devices for self-service functions for their users. And like I said, I'll throw in that last one, threat management, because that's really a big piece for financial institutions specifically, because as was mentioned, you are the most targeted because you control the money, right? So that's where the big payoff is for cyber criminals, is to kind of go after you. So in a nice package, Mass 360 can provide all of this and all of this support to your financial institution or your financial service company. So you might say, hey, this is great. What do I do next? How do I take a deeper look at features, functionalities, and capabilities? There's really kind of two things that you can do. One is you can connect with me via LinkedIn, and I'll connect you with the correct resource over here at IBM. Or you can just jump on our website and request a demo. It only takes 5 minutes to set up, 30 minutes to go through a configuration with one of our subject matter experts, depending on your use cases, and they'll get you configured for what you need to, the requirements that you need to meet. But other than that, that's all I have for you. I think we can probably shift on over here, Lenny, to the question and answer section.
Sure, and thanks to both of you for that great overview, first, Howard, of the sort of alphabet soup of fragmented pieces that we're using to sort of apply our governance and security and compliance policies to user access, and then Justin, for you explaining the importance of kind of the one ring to rule them all and bringing some unification to this so we can kind of do what it is we need to do when we need to do it. Justin, I also like the fact that you spoke about some specific use cases, because I think one thing all of our attendees are concerned about is sort of a boil the ocean project. So if we can sort of deploy this kind of technology to attack one issue in particular, whether it's sort of let's use it for spear phishing and ransomware, and then sort of expand it out to audit reporting and all this other stuff, I think that's a really good way to do this stuff, because we know what happens when you have scope creep too early. But we do have some questions, so let's get to them. One of them I think is for you, Justin, because you did mention, you've talked about unified endpoint management. We have talked about some of the different devices. Can you just clarify for us what the device scope is in terms of present support within your solution?
So I don't know specifically what they're looking for, but as far as unified endpoint management is concerned, I know that's kind of a hot button right now. The nice thing with Mass 360, we've been doing this before it was a hot button, right? Or even really before the term was coined. As far as the platform, Mass 360 platform is concerned, it's been around since 1991. We started in laptop management. That's where we kind of cut our teeth. And I'm thinking that's probably, we get that question a lot. I'm assuming that's probably where it's coming from, is, can we not only manage, the new Windows 10 devices, but also legacy Windows 7 devices, and we certainly can, right? That hasn't gone away. We've, it was obviously just a natural progression for the Mass 360 platform to move into, iOS, Android, and what would be I guess what we're most known for mobility management. But yeah, that's all in the console. It's all managed. And there actually is a difference between managing a Windows 7 device versus managing a Windows 10 device, and you can manage everything out of the Master 360 console for sure.
Gotcha. And you mentioned when you saw, I think you might have peeked at the questions, Justin, is when we talk about sort of not only different platforms on the end user side, but also sort of the devices and operating systems, do you want to talk at all about sort of the fragmentation maybe of Droid in particular? It's certainly very popular, but again, sort of unlike iOS, which is tightly controlled, there's a lot of different flavors. Do we want to support all that? Do we want to put some restrictions on it so that people aren't walking in with, something that might be older and less well patched?
Yeah, so it really depends on the use case. But there's nothing wrong with allowing the many various different flavors of Android in your environment, as long as you are really locking down at the data side. So that's really where the idea of containerization becomes important. As far as Master 360, there's you can set up compliance rules and ensure that somebody is not using a version of Android older than 4.4 or something like that.
Right.
So there are ways to lock it down to ensure that we're not just it's not just the Wild Wild West and any devices coming in. We want to have a controlled. Yes, it's fragmented, but we want to have it to be at least a controlled environment so we know kind of where the vulnerabilities are.
Yep, I want to ask you this one too, Justin, is we're talking a lot about this from sort of a technological point of view and what tools we're using to, detect platforms, disallow access, stuff like that. But don't we need to address some of these changes that are taking place in our organization through sort of policies too? Like getting our users to agree, maybe explicitly and in writing, both for our own governance purposes and also for, maybe to show to compliance auditors about here's what legitimate use of the device is, here's what you are agreeing to let the company do if in fact you run into trouble. Do you have much personal experience or that you want to share with us about the nature of policies and policy attestation that we've got to do to get this right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean that's a requirement, right? First and foremost, that they're pushing those out and enforcing, not just that they're getting somebody to sign it, but enforcing, right? That's the whole point of device management. But the second piece of that is capturing it, right? Yeah, it's great that we have somebody sign a piece of paper, but how do we ensure that this happens? So as part of Master 360, there's actually kind of a two-pronged approach. Before anybody can enroll, we were talking about a little identity access management and authorizing a device. Before a device can even get enrolled, they need to accept electronically that that policy that states, hey, you are now being delivered corporate data on your device. These are your responsibilities. These are the scenarios that you need to contact us in event that there's some type of data breach or you lose the device, etc. And in Master 360, as a kind of a sidebar, one of the things that you can do is actually push documents through the platform. That's typically the first document that gets pushed is really kind of that mobility policy. That your end users will always have that on hand and they know what their responsibilities are.
Yeah, I think that's really, really cool to link the kind of compliance paperwork process into the platform. Because, again, I think a lot of times people just think about bits and bytes, and they don't think about the engagement and the relationship between the employee or, in some cases, the contractor, too, right? Sometimes it's not such an explicit relationship. So you've got different kinds of agreements for different people. If you can link that directly into the platform, it further defragments how you're doing management, right? Because it not only defragments your ma'am and your mim and your mom and your moom, like Howard was talking about, but it also defragments this other thing, this compliance paperwork and process. So that's pretty interesting that you guys are handling that. I think I'll ask you one more before getting a final statement from both you guys. And again, if we didn't get to your question, we've got them here in the queue, so we'll get to them afterwards. But IBM sort of across the brand is talking about application of Watson's, machine learning, AI, whatever term we want to use for the kind of heuristics and analytics that you guys obviously have that can win at Jeopardy and chess and all those games. Is that being applied to the game of mobile security at all?
Absolutely. So somebody, I guess, was reading the news. We just recently made an announcement. I'm sure that's why it came through. It was just announced on Monday that Master 360 now is being the analytics side is now being powered by Watson, right? So now we have this kind of entire cognitive approach to securing your entire mobile computing environment. Before. Really it was what we would call local knowledge, right? Customer will call product expert, hey, I have this problem, what do I do, how do I handle this? Now it's taking a proactive approach where Watson can analyze your environment and say, hey, you have these vulnerabilities or you have these problems, this is how you fix it. Before you even have the problem, before you even read about it in the news, know that there's a vulnerability. Watson will have all of that information and take a look at your environment and make sure that you're doing what's necessary to secure everything.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting what you guys are doing because there is this issue of knowledge and staff knowledge, and we're all so busy and things happen so fast. The idea of applying a robot brain to my perimeter sounds pretty good. Howard, are you going to jump on there? I did want to give you opportunity also to share a final word before we wrap up, so go ahead.
Sure. Just the other day, I went out with my wife and met up with some friends, and it wasn't long before I realized that I didn't have my mobile device with me. I didn't have my Droid, and I remember that immediate feeling of sheer panic. And I say this mainly to convey that I think we're living in a time where our mobile devices have become part of our persona. They've become part of what we do every day, who we are every day. And, this requires a reimagining. If you think back to the ancient days where everybody sat at a desk with a computer in front of them that was connected to a network, we all describe that on the technology side as the network core, where all the servers and the storage were, and the network edge, where all the users were. But it was pretty easy to get your arms around because they were all pretty much in one building, or at least in one organization. And today, although we talk about cloud as, cloud, it's a fact of life, the reality is that cloud has changed that fundamental picture dramatically. And today, there are multiple network cores. There's a core that we use for productivity, a core that we use for managing our finances. There's a core that our company uses for order entry and for inventory control. There's a core that does this, a core that does that. There are multiple cores, and we have to be sure they all work well together. And the edge is no longer connected to a desk by a wire that runs back to a distribution facility. It's now connected through the ether. It's wirelessly connected, and it's been going on for years. But today in particular, these days, we have a much broader edge, a global edge, if you will, and multiple cores to worry about. And so enterprise mobility and security has become a consuming discipline. And if we're not thinking about that way, I think it's important for everybody to start to realize that this is part of the fabric of doing business in 2017. You have to be careful that all those devices that are now connecting wirelessly through the air to your cores, your multiple cores, everything has got to be watched vigilantly. Everything has got to be secured to prevent, because an ounce of prevention is worth tons of cure, and those tons of cure can put you out of business. And I think that what Justin has described here is an opportunity to turn to a really valid, really reliable resource that's been doing this for decades and decades and decades, and has adapted to this new world. And just looking through some of the things, some of the messaging from IBM, I've been very impressed with how carefully they wrap themselves around the entire picture, not just picking out point solutions. Because the worst thing you can do to yourself today is to pick out point solutions and try to slam them together. Nobody is that good at knitting. IBM has pre-knit this for you, and I think it's worth the investment of time and effort to explore beyond the fact that the services are excellent. Just the whole philosophy and the whole strategy they've developed, I think it's worth exploring. It's been a real learning experience for me getting prepared for today's presentation. So that would be my advice to our listeners.
And Justin, for you, I'm assuming that you would ditto that and maybe once again point people to the free trial?
Yeah, absolutely. So funny you mentioned, Howard, how technology has changed our personal lives. I was just talking with a colleague, and I said, something as simple as a phone number. If I lost my phone, I wouldn't know how to call any of my friends. Nobody memorizes phone numbers anymore. You know what I mean? So it is crazy. Just as much as it...
You'd contact them on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean... Just as much as they've transformed to something as simple like that in our personal lives, it's certainly transforming business. Mass 360 obviously is here to help. There is nobody has all the answers, which is why we're here, right? Keeps us in business. So certainly reach out, jump on our website, request the demo, and we can certainly dig in a little deeper to individuals' use cases and take it from there.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for going over all this, and I would also endorse the fact that there has been, IT's culture generally tends to be one of expediency, where we kind of solve problems as we need to, one by one. And because of that, right now the security picture is pretty fragmented. It can be ineffective. It can suck up a lot of our resources and keep us from doing other things because we're so busy putting together logs and trying to manually implement policies across multiple tools. So the idea of something that's more streamlined, make it more aligned with the business, save you some money, apply your limited IT skills and staff and bandwidth to other things besides security housekeeping, provide a better experience for millennials who have high expectations about the mobile workplace. All these things are pretty worth doing. So with that, I'll thank you for attending. We're come to the top of the hour. You're going to get a link to today's presentation on demand. Probably a really good idea when you get that to share it with somebody you report to, somebody who reports to you, anybody else in your business where you're trying to build some kind of consensus about how to get your arms around mobile compliance and security and experience. And again, you'll see the survey. Please fill that out and reply. And if you found your time with us today worthwhile, keep your eyes peeled for other invitations. Love to spend another hour with you, or 45 minutes, or whatever we have together, addressing another topic of interest with you, for you. So on behalf of Howard and Justin, again, this is Lenny Liebman, and on behalf of eWeek, we thank you for your time. Have a great and safe day.